Okay, so we have sound, and so you probably have an image on the screen. It's much smaller than I wanted you to see, but it actually is a live image where I can actually show you the gauge and do stuff, and also connect with the PC as I need to. So one of the things we've been trying to make sure you understand is that everything that you want to be able to do with any of the software or Wi-Fi or all the features are actually built into the gauge. So many of you may be very familiar with that or understand that, but we just want to stress that you do not need to use your PC or your Android or iPhone device to do most of the stuff that's on there. And one of the things I want to make sure people understand is clearly I'm sure you've got it, you press the buttons, you get all that. Hopefully you found out how to do a baseline, which shows up under settings right at the top. And I can hit baseline and actually tell it to capture. And it begins to capture one. And then I can actually hit in capture. And when I go back, that shows up under channel A. So for those of you that may not have known exactly where it was, now you do. The quick guides are a phenomenal source of information. They're nice, beautiful pictures. If you do not have a copy of your quick guide and would need that, then let us know so we can actually put up a link so that you can get that. Yes. Okay, that sounds good. So if you need a copy of the PDFs, you're welcome to shoot a line in the questions, and Sasha can send back some information on the quick guides. Right. So again, I apologize for the small image, but the goal was you actually kind of see the gauge. You can do the set pressure. I actually have a fan in the background. I'm going to do a 10, which is a very rare pressure. But if you do any kind of training, these kind of low pressures can actually give you information on your gauge. And don't let it overwhelm the background noise, because 25 or 50 pascals gets pretty loud, as you know, standing next to the fan when that happens. Just real quick, so if I press channel A, I can actually use the hold feature, something some people may or may not have caught in the quick guide. Press it again, it releases it. All right. I don't really have enough pressure to get good data out of there, so I'm just going to go over and change the results on channel B to CFM. I can press any of the options that show up and go back. I'm going to change my device so maybe we'll get some better results. So right now I have any of the Minneapolis showing up. I can also scroll through and pick the Retrotec. I'm going to pick the our duct tester and go to the range of B. I can even change that if I want to try and get some kind of results to show up. All right. So hopefully the noise in the background is not too loud or overwhelming. I'll stop it just to make sure it's not a distraction. All right. So those are some of the basic features that I know you guys are familiar with, but I want to make sure it's clear that I can actually go through and change the settings here and get air changes per hour. I can get CFM per 100 square feet, per square foot, even per 1,000 square foot if I wanted to on the duct tester. I just keep toggling through the options that are there. So they're set up for CFM per 100 square feet, and I go back, and that's actually the results that I would have there. Right. If there's anything else you guys want to cover as I go through some of these options, please make sure you throw them into questions. I'll try and catch them, or Sasha and Colin, who are listening in, will make sure that we touch base on those. All right, so the gauge I kind of covered. What I want to do now is actually bring up one of the things that people asked about a lot, which actually was to control from your PC and control from your smartphone or tablet. Right? So it looks as though several people wanted to do the tablet first, so let's go ahead and give that a try. All right? So right next to me I have a tablet. Right? This is actually my Android tablet. Right? And what I'll do is I'm going to open up the gauge remote. Right? And when you're dealing with any of your phone or Android or Apple devices, whether it's phone or tablets, right? There's two ways that you can actually connect. It thinks it's a Wi-Fi. You cannot do a USB directly from the gauge into your smartphone or your tablet. You have to use a Wi-Fi. Right? So the options are, again, you can join a network that's existing, or I can ask it to create one. Okay. So I want to make sure we kind of cover that, because a lot of people want to understand my Wi-Fi options. Right? So I already have a Wi-Fi network happening. So I just want to run through the features, and I'll show you how I can actually change my Wi-Fi options and make sure you understand the difference between create, which the gauge will do, it'll create its own hotspot, or I can actually join an existing network, maybe it's on your phone or in the room with a router or another network that you actually have access to. So right now I actually have one. Somebody asked about the iPad. The iPad does work, and I mean, sometimes I find it to be sometimes more user-friendly, but sometimes the Droid will actually find my network better. So they both have their great features and sometimes a challenge. So when I open it up, it actually automatically searches for gauges, right, and it actually found the gauge right here and shows me the actual serial number. And there's a little button next to it, hard to see, but I press that, and then it says I can tell if I want that gauge. So if I had other gauges in the room or near me that were on and connected to that network, I could say connect, right? And right now, my smartphone or device is actually controlling the actual gauge, right? It even says on here that I'm actually kind of locked out right now. We're going to update this so that you will be able to use either one, but right now, this actual tablet is controlling the gauge. All right, so again, I can actually change the device. I can go through and pick, maybe I'm actually going to use the Minneapolis Duck Blaster. All right, it automatically makes me always pick whatever range or rings I have. So let's say I'm using ring 2. Now I've actually have my device set. And if I'm going to do CFM per 100 square feet, it wants to know what's the area, what's the square footage in order to calculate this automatically. Something like that. All right. Technology, love it. It's going through a USB hub, which sometimes has mine has a hiccup. 1 second. Okay, I found the device. We're on. Connect. All right. And I can do set pressure, 10, set, and now I'm actually controlling the the gauge itself. So the gauge could be sitting next to the fan, and leave it there, and I can move around the house and actually turn it on or off. So it's no surprise that technology is not always perfect. There are some challenges that go along with some of these things. I can be upfront and say if it's not working, just turn it off, kill the app from your device, make sure you're on the correct network. Those are kind of the challenges that come across, and start it back up and it'll come back. So all new software always has some little inherent kind of glitches, and we're not immune to that. So this allows you to actually roam around the house pretty far, whether you're using an existing network or the create network, right? So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually show you how to create a network here and then have your device go to that, right? So I'm going to stop, all right? And I'm going to go out of here, all right? So I'm no longer connected to the device, all right? So under settings, all right, the first one actually had several settings which gave me a baseline, area, and some other options. And I'm going to go to network, all right? Network is at the top, and I'll get rid of the smudge here. Okay. So at the top here, I actually can see Wi-Fi, all right? And if I actually take off my screen, sorry, then you can actually decide whether you want to join an existing network. I can toggle it again to create one. Your other options, I'll just go through. I can also disable the whole Wi-Fi network, or I can do a wired, which actually is an Ethernet connection. Or I go back to join. I'm going to toggle through. I'm going to go to create. What I want to do is it's going to create its own Wi-Fi hotspot, right? Which allows me to not need any other router, no other source for the Wi-Fi except the gauge itself, right? So I'm going to hit create, and I'm just going to go back. All the other settings below here are automatically determined by the gauge itself. So when I go back, all right, it determines it wants to create, and it's giving me its IP address. I say OK. And at the top, I actually have a Wi-Fi signal that's being sent out by the gauge itself, right? So I'm going to go to, I have to change the Wi-Fi network on my device, whether it's your phone or a tablet. This is the one glitch that a lot of people forget about, is that their actual tablet or their phone is not on the same Wi-Fi network as their gauge. All right? So we're trying to come up with a reminder that will make sure you do that, or can go to your Wi-Fi settings. But as you can imagine, Droid and Apple and everybody is very particular about how to get to their settings. Right? So I'm going to move out of this program. I'm going to go to My Settings. All right, and I'm going to go to I wanted settings. All right, so here's my actual Wi-Fi options. All right, it may be hard to read, but I have a router that's here, or the next option down, it says DM32 40094, and that actually is the serial number of the gauge, right? So I'm going to select that, right? And now I'm on the same Wi-Fi connection that's actually directly coming from the gauge itself. So I go back, right? It stays on that Wi-Fi setting, right? I'm going to restart the app just because I think it's always a better way to go, all right? Back to home. All right, so it found the actual gauge, and you notice that the number may be different, may be hard to read on your screen, but this number is different. This number is actually directly related to the actual IP address that the gauge was given me. So I hit connect. Oh, I got to select it, sorry. Select it, connect. All right. And once again, I'm now controlling it. The difference was earlier I actually had a router in the room to kind of start off and make sure it was connected. And now these two are talking directly to each other, right, and only to each other. Right, so I couldn't have any other devices trying to communicate, or I'm not online with my tablet or smartphone right now. These are only communicating to each other directly. So I can do the same thing. I can start up, set pressure, 1, 0. I'm keeping the pressure low again just so it's not too loud on the on our audience. It also tells me that I'm locked out. I'm controlling everything by the tablet itself. And I can change my settings. So I can go back and say, you know what? I want to see CFM. I go back. And actually on the tablet it's a lot easier because all of the options are on one screen, and it kind of works again like a smartphone or a tablet like we're used to. I'm going to open this up a little bit and see if we can't get some quicker results out of that. So this is one of the most common ways you can set this up, and I've done this in my own house. I've gone upstairs, down the hall, you know, a good 40 feet, 60 feet away, depending on how you want to calculate it from how the bird flies through the house or how much I walked. But it'll do an average house pretty much from end to end. It will not do a 3-story house from corner to corner, but it actually will go a lot further than you expected. I was at a training facility recently, and we went through an industrial setup, and we went through 4 different rooms that all had their own glass separation and walls, and probably were almost 70 to 100 feet away, and the signal was working great. So I want to find out, is there any other questions about the Gauge remote app? You can go get it on, you can go download the app. It's free from the Google Play or the Apple iTunes, and install it on any of your devices. If you have a Windows phone, then contact us because we actually have the app that will work on your phone directly. All right, so just to confirm, if I wanted to connect with a different source, I can use my direct connection. Mark said it kind of went very fast. There's several. My goal is that people who tune in today will actually get their questions resolved either from Sasha or Colin or the things I'll present. So is there something else I can cover everybody while I want to do this before I move on to our next perfect. Great, thanks, Mark. Okay, so just make sure we're on the same path. If I wanted to use a router, I think the most practical application of using a different Wi-Fi connection would be your phone can actually generate a signal or something else you may go through. If you're looking for the Gauge remote, there is no space between Gauge and remote. So it happened to me. You can search again, just Gauge remote, all one word. So I go to settings again. Oh, I got to log out of here because it's controlling the gauge. Now the gauge is free, so if I go to settings, I have the option of going to the network, and again I create, or I can also join a different network. All right. And it has join. And it is common that your gauge will not be able to be interacted with right now with when you have the Gauge remote active. We're actually going to probably modify that so that your application on your Android or Apple device will update, and will still be able to do that. Right? So if you want to do join, it's as simple as actually when you're on join, you want to press the little Wi-Fi button that's down here. Make it's clear. Right? The Wi-Fi button will allow you to select whatever router or system you may have. So if you have your phone set up for a hotspot, it's going to give you the name of your hotspot. And all I'm going to do is just enter that. So for here, I would put in so I can enter RT, and I hit set, and that's the name of my network. Now, if you're going to enter or join a network from your device directly, it must be unsecured or not have a security password. If it does, we need to use the software that's on the PC. And the reality is that although the gauge will do a lot, it still takes a lot of computing power for it to actually do all of that. So we actually do that on the PC, and I can add that here. Okay, so if it's unsecured, no password, I can actually go here, put the name in. It is case sensitive. When I go back, it will actually join that network. And that's the name of the network, 10.10.10.100. And it joined it there also. So those are your Wi-Fi options. Either do a direct connect, direct hotspot from the device itself, which is the simplest and most common, nothing else required. Or if you have a hotspot on your phone, or if you have a router or something you want to use, then that's actually the way to go through and hit join and connect that. I can't enlarge the screen. Unfortunately, my webcam would not get acknowledged by the software, so I'm stuck with the smaller screen image that I have. I don't know if there's any way to make it any bigger. I tried to make it bigger and I could not. Yeah, it's still the same. I apologize for the small screen. I usually like to make that as big as possible. Right? I'm going to make the iPad disappear, so we only focus on the screen for right now, just on the gauge itself. Right? So I want to stay with the Wi-Fi options. When you bought your gauge, you could have downloaded and should have downloaded a variety of software that would come with your gauge itself, and it all comes from the Retrotec website. And what I want to make sure you do is, if you don't have the software, you want to download it and make sure you have that. And it comes with the virtual gauge, which I'll cover in a second. It also comes with a thing called the configurator, which allows you to potentially update your gauge or enter a secure network if that's something you want to do. And there's also a data logger, which are some things I want to cover a little later today. What I'd like to do now is bring up actually the virtual gauge. Let me ask you, so I don't have a poll for it, but I'm looking for anybody who may be using a secure network and needs to understand how that works. So if you need to understand that, please send a question in or let Sasha and Colin know so I can make sure we address that. If you don't need to know how to do it, it can become kind of complicated, so I want to stay with the basics and not lose anybody. Okay, what I'd like to do is actually bring up the software in the package that would come there, and if you download it, then it comes with 3 individual applications. Right? One is called Virtual Gauge. It actually is a complete simulator for the actual gauge. Somebody asks, will this work with multiple gauges? Does it try and set up a network for each gauge? Let me address that question because there may be something other people might be thinking about. Is that when I ask each gauge to create its own network, then it will give me that one signal that's a direct link to that gauge alone. Whether I'm using my phone or tablet or even my PC, I'm only connecting to that directly. I cannot establish a network from the gauge itself. Right? If I want to have 3 or 4 gauges on a network that I can use with my PC with either Fantastic or multiple remote gauges, virtual gauge open, then I actually need to use a router or something else that's able to handle multiple connections at one time. So I have virtual gauge over here on the side. So hopefully you have found this and downloaded it. It is one of the greatest features. I have a lot of amazing feedback from people when I show this to them. One of the things that it does, even before I'll connect it to another gauge, is that it is an entire gauge into itself, whether I'm connected or not to a gauge. I can actually go through and do a start gauge simulator down here. So if anybody's a trainer, I highly recommend that you download this and send this link to your students, because they're able to download this on their PC. They can actually hit Start Gauge Simulator, and it actually brings up the entire screen like you would see right next to me. It doesn't matter if I have a gauge connected or not, this program will work all by itself. So for just a moment, I'm going to actually put this to the bottom. So it's designed that I can actually, at the top here, I have the settings, which toggle the little drawer to come in and out. There's a help feature in your traditional make it smaller or kill the application at the top here. Right? I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the settings on the side, so now I actually have a gauge in front of me. And it's actually, I can change the range settings, or I can actually change the device. All the same features that you actually have in the gauge. The screen is actually adjustable to fit on whatever screen you may have. Right? So let's say I'm going to do the Minneapolis 3, the 110 series, and I'll select a range of a B-ring on it, and I can actually adjust the settings. Let's say I want to do volume or area. I can also set it to the results that I would want. Let's say I want to change the results to CFM. And I can actually make the gauge run. I do not need to be connected to a gauge in order to do this. This is one of the best training features that's out there. I can actually say, let's see, it's 50 pascals set. And maybe we can do a sound feature in the future. It would go and rev up for you and you hear sound. But right now I'm actually able to establish that I have 50 pascals. And it kind of fluctuates a little so it feels like a real gauge. And I actually have real results here. And I can change those results to air changes per hour or whatever type of settings you wanted your students to find, and they actually now have results that you could actually do as a practice setup. I can turn on or off the at feature, which it already is at 50 anyway, but really it's a full functioning gauge. If I change the range, it will actually change my results. So if you really want to, again, just practice or want to, see what's going to happen when you change ranges, or see what kind of issues happen if I change to a different device. I do the duct blaster on ring 2, and those are all my numbers that I got. So of course I want to change it maybe to CFM. Again, to me it's a really fun way to actually practice and play. If you have students, it's phenomenal. The other feature that it does is it actually connects to your gauge directly. All right. I'll make it a little larger so we can all see the screen. I'll open up the side panel, the settings. All right. So this is where I was a second ago at Start Gauge Simulator. And up here I can actually tell it to find gauges, and here's the settings that I have. I can tell it to do only a USB connection, or I can do a network, which means that it's I have the computer here set up at the same network as the gauge, or I can tell it to go find both, like whatever's out there. All right. So I'll hit both just to see what I have, and then I'll tell it to find gauges. Okay. And in order to do the webinar, my computer is actually using the Wi-Fi where I'm at in order to connect. So I don't have the ability to connect to my gauge Wi-Fi. It's one of the challenges that you can only connect to one thing at one time. So if I was using Ethernet, I could do that. So my gauge, which I had next to me, so this gauge right here, all right, is now actually connected with a USB in the bottom, all right, over to my computer. All right, so I'm going to tell it to connect. I'm going to go ahead and hit the little star button, which is the settings, and have it disappear. So now I'm actually have the actual gauge, all right, and this actually is a two-way. The gauge is no longer locked out. I can actually touch the gauge and do anything I want to change. If I want to do set pressure on the gauge, 1, 0, set. I can see it. I can see it on the gauge itself where I was, all right, and I can see it actually on the gauge, virtual gauge right here on the PC. I can also change right here on the PC. I can actually use my mouse, all right, to change the settings. I wanted to go back to interchanges per hour or CFM per 100 square feet or EQLA, and have those settings change automatically. So the reality is I can control the gauge from my PC, right from the kitchen or wherever you're comfortable with, and do not have to go over to the gauge and do anything, just as I was not able to use the my phone or tablet to do the same thing. Someone asked, will the virtual gauge control several gauges? The virtual gauge will not, it can control several gauges, but I'm going to show you how that actually works. Right? So this gauge right here that I have, I'll put it over here right next to the actual live gauge that I have. So these two are connected. I can actually go to the virtual gauge again and actually click on it again. All right? And it can actually now go and see what other gauges are out there. All right, so I just pulled out an extra gauge in my pouch real quick. And I can tell it to go find gauges. Oh, it won't do it. 1 second. All right, so I've grabbed another gauge from my pouch, threw it into a USB, and now I actually have another gauge right here. I can hit connect. And now what I have is actually two separate gauges being controlled right here on my PC. I can see their actual screens right next to each other. I'm going to hit stop to make sure that noise in the background disappears. So confirming that this gauge I have here on the right side is the actual live gauge itself. You can see the same icons I have. And the other gauge over here could be controlling a duct tester. And I can set it up to do any kind of test also. So I can do a simultaneous test from my PC in the comfort of my kitchen. So confirming that the virtual gauge is a PC application, it's not Mac. It will work on Parallels or something that can run PC on your Mac. I do that also, but it is a PC application specific. So again, virtual gauge, which we have up on the screen right now, will control as many as I want. So I could even have another gauge, or if I was training, I could have 2 or 3 gauges out in the classroom, and those could all be connected. And you see at the top here, it tells me what my serial number is that it's connected to. So for this last one, I'm going to just tell it to do the simulation, and I could actually have multiple gauges running from one location and see what the results are. So for a trainer's application, this is phenomenal. The whole class could see what everybody was doing. Or if I have 2 manometers and I'm doing a combination test or want to set them up, I can actually run everything from a central location and have a seat at the kitchen table and run the test. And I'm going to close this out. So that's an overview of virtual gauge and how it actually connects live to a device. I can connect it with USB. I can connect it also with a Ethernet cord, or I can connect it through Wi-Fi with a variety of options from either direct hotspot from the gauge, or there could be a network that's created either from my PC or a variety of options that, as long as the actual gauge and the computer are on the same network, then I'm able to actually read the gauge directly from virtual gauge. So hopefully that helped you out there, Michael, with what it'll do. The software is free, and there should have been a link up there that you hopefully can see. And whenever you open it up, it actually checks for updates. The software does automatically, so we're constantly trying to update and bring new features to that. The last one was to make the screen scalable, which was a great addition to being able to work with different screen sizes. All right. Any other questions about virtual gauge or how that actually works? That was good? All right. Again, I apologize for the small video screen. My camera was not able to be found by the software. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and close the virtual gauge. All right. There's some other software that is included, in one of which, for people that are have a QA provider or quality control or code officials, this next setup I'm going to show you is an incredibly valuable feature. There is software which we have fantastic to control and log your data that you can actually have, but also includes a little program that's called Data Logger. Right? It says there's an update based on my challenge today. I'm just going to hit skip it and we'll open up what I have. So what Data Logger is, I want to make sure we focus on the screen itself right here. All right? Is I'm going to tell it what gauge I want it to connect to. All right? So I'm going to ask it to find what gauges that are connected. And it found both gauges. It found the yellow one over here, that's the 0094, and I have a red one over here, and it's ends in 352. All right, I can put that up there also. All right. And I can ask it which one of these gauges, or both of them, I want it to log. So I can say, I'm going to have it log this data, or I can do both. It tells me what serial number I'm connected and what is the firmware and everything about the gauge. So this actually is kind of like your basic settings or checkup on what actually the gauge is doing. And here's where it gets the real power comes in. Is again, this is a logger. I'm going to ask it how frequently do I want it to capture the data that the gauge actually has. Right? So I'm going to take away the red one because I'm not going to data log it. I just want to see the yellow one. All right. I can do 1 second. I can do 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or every minute. I leave it at 1 second because I really want it to grab whatever data comes through the actual gauge. All right. Over here, I could actually tell it how to control the gauge directly from here by setting speed, or I can set the pressure to 25 or 50 or 30 or whatever I wanted, but I can actually use the gauge itself and it will log that. So at the bottom, that's where do I want to save it. And I actually save it in a Dropbox or a cloud type of place. So as soon as it's saved, I have it on my desktop and I have it in other places that I can share with people. So right down here it says start logging. And when I show people how to use this, I tell them as soon as you're set up to just start logging, whether you even have your gauge, fully ready to go, everything's plugged in, and it will just keep track of it, what's happening. So right now my gauge is off, and I can see my results showing up right here. This is pressure A and pressure B, including nothing's happening. So I'm going to do set pressure. I'm going to do I'll do 15, so it's a little louder, and set. You can see the results showing up right here. And every second it keeps logging those. So I can let this go as long as I'm actually doing my test. So if you want to do QA to confirm this is what I had when I was at my job site, or if you have other people that you're working with and want to confirm what they have at their job site, this is a great feature. Right? To make life simple, I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to tell it to stop logging. And I want it to open the location and show me what I have. These are all the ones that I actually have in my folder, and here's the one I just did. And it's an Excel spreadsheet. Very simple to use and easy to read. Make it a little smaller so you can. Okay. So this is the data that this actually put into an Excel spreadsheet automatically. It told me automatically what gauge I had, the serial number, what was the device I had. It actually will keep track of the device that actually was connected to. It wants to keep track of the range that I had set for it. It told me what the speed was that I had when it was logging, what was the pressure on channel A and B. As I scroll down, this is when I actually had the gauge running. And it also tells me what my results were. So if I change the results from air changes per hour to CFM, it would change those numbers for me automatically down here. And give me a date and time in seconds that I also have here. So for something that gives me a simple way to actually log the data, the exact stuff from the gauge, you can also set up an easy graph if you want to see what this looks like for a variety of options. But this actually is a major QA way to actually either keep track of what you had and know that when you left you wrote it down correctly, or if you have other people that you're trying to do QA on, I talked to several people recently that some building officials will find this to be a valid data point that they can actually have sent to them, and they will then be able to confirm compliance versus having to go out and actually see the test or see the results live. Several municipalities in Connecticut require live confirmation, and they're willing to accept this type of data. Any questions about the data logger itself? Again, this is free. It comes with the package that you would have had, that you would have downloaded. All right. I have one other poll that I wanted to throw out before I lose the end of the time. And we're kind of curious as to what kind of folks do I have out there. PPI, HERS, weatherization folks, and or are you doing client type of work directly, or other? If you're doing something else that didn't show up on my short list here, please don't hesitate to just throw a comment into the questions area so we can actually confirm what type of work you're doing. And I believe you should be able to pick multiple options there. The client work that I asked them to put up there was defined as not really necessarily a utility base. So you're actually working, directly from the call from the client and with the client without any leads from a utility or other source of lead from that. All right, here's our results. All right, so we have a pretty good size PPI, and a lot of people are doing direct client work, which I'm really happy to see that because that's been a challenge for our industry. And a few weatherization folks, I've been trying to reach out to more and more of the HERS folks. So if the QA stuff that I showed you is valuable to you, don't hesitate to contact Retrotec directly or myself, and I can actually elaborate on how that could benefit yourself and your QA program. One thing I want to bring back up is the configurator. A minute ago I had the data logger, and the screens may look very kind of similar, right? But what we're trying to do is actually confirm whether or not I have a firmware update or how to change the settings for the network. So if I did have a network and I needed to actually change the something in the gauge because I wanted to connect it to a network that had a password, then this is where I would use to do that, right? Gauge. What I have on my screen is the configurator. This is how I could actually change the setup. So if I wanted to do a network, my gauge came back automatically. I just will plug it back in and plug it back in, disconnect it and reconnect it. Right. So right here, it asks me for my Wi-Fi settings, and right now it's already set to a router that I have, but it has no secure settings. So if I'm going to go to a router, let's just say it's my home network, and it is case sensitive, and it has a password, whatever your password is. All right. And then I can actually do that, and I'll be able to save it over here to the gauge. So if you do want to use a network at your house or someplace that's secured, which means it requires a password, you need to use the configurator, right, which is, again, part of the software package that's included. And the icon at the bottom looks like this with a little star around it. Right? So I can now say save to the gauge. Okay, the update was successful. And if I go back to my gauge, it would actually show me that I actually have this network and I can join that system. All right, in 3:15, I appreciate everybody for hanging out. I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar, and I appreciate everybody for coming. Thanks again, and we'll see you maybe tomorrow if you're a fire person, and if not, next Thursday will be pressure and flow workshop. Thanks again.